Welcome to another episode of the Australian Retirement Podcast. Today we're talking all things travel. I thought it was a nice little pivot. I'm here again with friend and fellow financial advisor, James O'Reilly. Welcome.
Hey there. How you doing?
Pretty good. Just planning my next trip.
Talk to me.
With my CBA profits.
I was waiting till this one came up. Okay. All right.
Tuscany. I plan to. I did get in trouble for saying that last time on air, that I plan to retire in Tuscany.
It's nice to have goals.
It won't be a long time from now, and I don't speak Italian. So yeah, nice challenging one.
Yeah, good work to be done there. Yes, well, look, hooking back momentarily to that CBA bet that we have, of course, I think the price is 155. That were overs and unders at the end of the calendar year, and we've had an interesting ride. I had the best of it for a bit, and now you've got the best of it. And all things being equal, if I was a betting man,
you're going to stick with your bet? You're going to double down?
I've got no choice now. I'm not going to lay down here. And hey, anything could happen. It's still a little while ago.
Anything did happen. And it still turned out fine. It said it was 166 at the time of recording, so we may be a few weeks later than that.
No, RBA is going to lower rates, going to compress margins.
Not far off an all-time high either. The all-time high is 169.
Yeah, well played, sir. Well played.
Plateauing.
All right. Well, you just let me know where you want to go out to dinner, and we'll get that organised.
Maybe an airfare would be fine. Maybe instead
Tuscany.
Yeah, Tuscany. Get me straight to Italy.
Yeah,
the best way to get there. I think this is a conversation. This episode kind of everything we do is kind of triggered by the conversations that we have, and it's almost I don't know about you, but every time I meet a new client, an existing client, the first conversation we have is about travel.
Yeah, it's at the forefront of so many people's minds, especially as you approach retirement, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's be good to why you think it's so important, and why your clients. We both work with retirees. We also work with accumulators who are, travel isn't just for retirees. But is it becoming more? Do you feel like it's becoming more popular or more a higher objective for people, or is it just normal and we're becoming wealthier and able to try and afford it?
Yeah, it has to be. I say that because if you look back to, anecdotally looking at my own life, I didn't do a huge amount of travel. Like my kids have done more travel than they're not. I've got a 4-year-old that did more travel than I did. With my parents below 18.
I was dragged around Australia in an Austin Healey when I was 13. That was the most travel I did in 12 days.
Okay, we're sorry to everyone. We're going to take it. I've got to lean into this. So I think this is one of those things. Like when you described it initially, I thought, that'd be really nice. And I thought, hang on, that's a long way to travel in an old days. Austin Healey. I'm not sure how well those seats are made. I don't think they're ergonomic. So
there's different types of travel for everyone.
How did you get around Australia in 12 days?
By driving about 7 to 8 hours a day.
Okay.
Yeah. The cost of fuel was much lower back then. I must have been 12 or 13, and it comes up all the time. It clearly has some sort of imprint on my psyche, being sitting in the front of a convertible car.
But what do you mean around Australia? Like you didn't do the Gibb River Road, for example, in an Austin Healey. So like,
we started off at the Broken Hill races, so the home of BHP. So live in Melbourne. We drove to Broken Hill, which technically covered Victoria, New South Wales. Broken Hill.
Yeah.
From Broken Hill, we decided to drive to Perth.
Don't say we decided. You didn't. You had no decision.
It was supposed to be a bonding experience.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure who bonded with who.
So you just shot over to Perth quickly.
Yeah, about 2. From memory, it might have been 2 days, maybe 3 to Perth. Mm-hmm. So Broken Hill to Ceduna to like Kalgoorlie, into Perth. I think we stayed there one night. And then a place called Exmouth. I got to get the pronunciation here right, because the people in WA say it a lot different to I do anyway. We had the whole Rask discussion. I got judged on that too. And then up to a place called Coral Bay, which barely existed back then. Broome, 2-night stay. Kununurra or Catherine, one of the two. And then we said, I think that was the only night in Northern Territory, and we managed to get through the entire Northern Territory in a day, back when there were very few speed limits.
Yep.
To arrive in Longreach, the Crocodile Dundee pub?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
I think it was Longreach. We visited an Air Force base, got to Queensland. There was a car rally or meeting point in Sunshine Coast. So I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll fly home from here.
That's a full-blown round Australia trip.
Yeah, in like 12 days.
It's as you said.
Yeah.
Okay, so you flew back from Queensland.
No.
Oh,
I was hoping I would.
You
I was like, yeah, I can't sit in this car anymore.
Wow.
There's a car that the thermometers broke. They went up to 60 degrees and they popped in the car basically. And then I had to drive through Canberra on the way home. So technically we missed Tasmania. We didn't hit every state, but we hit every mainland state and territory.
Well, beat that. Beat that, grey nomads. Yeah. Unbelievable.
That would have been cheap apart from the fuel, I'd say.
Yeah. But I imagine fuel was probably priced a little different.
In the 90s, it would have been, it would have been fine.
We're going to talk about that though, right? Like, so firstly,
that was a big segue, wasn't it?
Let's talk about travel and why it is so popular. I think it's becoming more popular. There's a number of reasons for that, but I think
Scenery,
cultural expectations about for people in terms of what they're doing, and I think it's become more commonplace to just say, "Oh, I just want a holiday. I just want to get away." Especially for Gen Ys and millennials, that's a really popular thing. That was less of a thing for younger Australians in previous generations.
I think we're just so open to new lifestyles and cultural changes, and we're seeing, the prevalence of social media. We're seeing what we're missing out on now. But I think what Australia was founded, for lack of a better word.
Be careful.
Yeah. Modern Australia, like 1788. So the modern Australian history is like the oldest buildings we have are 100 years old, up to 200 years old. And obviously there's much more more history in Indigenous Australia. But when we talk about Europe, there's houses that are more than 200 years. There's castles that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. There's thousands of years old. It's this incomplete different history and culture, and I get that attraction. Not just seeing the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe and those sort of things, but there is just, and you can see it now. You can, every time you go on social media, you're being influenced to go to certain places, and it looks so much more beautiful than where we are, and it looks warm all the time. And I think it is the prevalence of that. There's definitely a bit of FOMO in the younger age groups. I can feel that for sure. But I think for a lot of older people in their careers, it's more about a lot of people delay gratification. They've worked and saved and never, took their 4 weeks off, didn't travel much more outside of that. And more, I think people are realizing they need to enjoy experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I also wonder how much proximity has to do with it. Like we spoke before the show about the idea that if we're in the UK, for example, then heading over to Europe and go to Corfu or go to Greece or any of those sorts of places, that's a short trip in a relative sense. And so you've got so much of the world, so to speak, at your fingertips in a cultural sense. Whereas in Australia, to go and enjoy those experiences and get a meaningful cultural difference to our own culture, you really have to travel on a plane for long enough that it's the whole day.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing that, then naturally you're going to extend that trip out. But the byproduct of that is that it's hard to find the time to go over on these bigger holidays. So I think especially as people, when I speak to people who are in that pre-retirement phase and they're talking about travel, often the focus on travel is really sort of the things that we couldn't do while we were working.
Yeah.
They're the big trips that we want to go over here and spend 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks there, have a really good time, immerse ourselves, and sometimes beyond. And for whatever reason, work just doesn't easily facilitate that. So it's better to just park all of this in once we don't have the responsibilities of work, that's one of the first things we're going to do.
Yeah, and I think that's important to think about. That's a challenge we face during our working career. And, travel is becoming more attainable for some people, but also less attainable for other people at the same time. So it'd be interesting to see the kind of challenges you're seeing people face, your clients, friends, when it comes to travel, and looking at the costs, looking at the options, looking at the world's at our fingertips now. Where do you see the biggest challenges outside of finding the time during your career?
Logistics.
Yeah,
it's the cost.
Yeah.
To do. Again, similarly, because the first step, let's say we're going to Europe, for instance, the first step, the return flights for example, a couple, we're going to be looking at, we'll call it 4 to 5K if you're trying to keep a lid on things.
Yeah.
By the time that if you've already invested 4 to 5K to get over there, you're unlikely to do the whole trip on a shoestring.
Yeah.
You've already got this mindset of, okay, it's going to cost a bit of money. And I think a lot of Australians that consider the idea of travel over to the UK, Europe, the USA, these sorts of South America, in their mindset, they've just resolved to the fact that this is going to be expensive.
And then you got travels, you got to buy new luggage, you got to buy travel insurance, you got to buy the neck pillow at the airport. Like it's not just your airfares either.
Yeah. It's a lot. And what's more, I think when we did some research before this, we identified that not only is it expensive, but it is becoming more expensive, right?
Yeah, growing significantly faster than inflation, which we did have a look at AI and then did the actual research. I pulled out the CPI, pulled out the spreadsheet. So interestingly, over the last 10 years, it hasn't been as pronounced. That I think inflation for travel is about 42 versus something like that. But for the last 5 years, international. This is only international. I didn't look at domestic. This is, you could break it out. 33% inflation over the last 5 years on international travel compared to 23% for general inflation. So if you just do a very blunt, divide that 10% by 5, it's growing 2% more than inflation, or it's growing, if you want to really get aggressive, at 50% more than general inflation. Mm-hmm. So the cost of traveling overseas has jumped significantly, and we can feel that just trying to book an airfare.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I mean, my back isn't that bad, but some level of comfort is what is warranted, I guess, when you're flying for an entire day, if it's even at all possible. Even, I'm short enough that.
Are you trying to justify your first class tickets?
Premium economy. I'm justifying premium economy, which is, I think, apparently where the airfares make the most money as well. Yeah.
Points plus pay is the solution for that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think more and more people want to travel well because it is an incredibly taxing experience to get across. You are traveling, you're sitting in airports for like 18 to 24 hours.
Yeah, it is a lot. Yeah, and as part of that, again, when you go over there, you want to be there for longer to justify the travel time. So I was surprised at that too. I'd always thought that travel broadly, thinking about flights, et cetera, there was, we're on this extended phase of sort of racing to the bottom to get travel costs as low as possible. But it seems that we've sort of bottomed out in terms of the cost. There was a period there where travel was remarkably inexpensive as a function of household incomes and our circumstances, particularly flights. And we're now starting to see that shift in the other, at least stabilize and ultimately starting to grow again.
Now, I'm the wrong person to ask for this. I'm going to put this on you, which is
bring it on.
With this in mind, we're talking about, traveling, not necessarily on a shoestring budget, but have you got any tips that you've seen or you've done yourself? I know you've actually traveled a fair bit with your family. It's always more expensive traveling with children as well. Double the airfares, double the rooms. But have you got any ways and strategies that people can put a cap on or to keep a lid on their travel costs? And that's kind of before we go into some of the machinations of how you actually afford it.
Yep.
What impact does all this travel have on your retirement income?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, under all circumstances, keep your children below 2.
Never age. Just get a false passport?
Look, it could be cheaper. I don't know how you go with a 7-year-old on your knees for a long haul flight, but there's some immediate things that stand out. I mean, when you are moving into retirement in particular, one of your biggest advantages here from a travel viewpoint is that you don't have the same time constraints that most families have.
Yeah.
So you have the luxury of being able to pick travel times that aren't your big shoulder seasons. You're going to have fewer crowds. You're not going to have snotty-nosed kids running around screaming and shouting at the pool that you're trying to lounge by.
People jumping in the Trevi fountain.
Yeah. Now, look, I love my kids as much as the next man, but there are some periods on holidays where I don't want my own kids there. You don't want them there either. So, so to that end, certainly thinking about the timing and trying to align your travel to periods where it is quieter will give you much better, not only flights, it'll give you so much more availability from an accommodation viewpoint, which means much better pricing.
And a lot of the time you can get more mild weather, I think is quite interesting. That, when they say the shoulder, you'd be right at the end or right at the beginning of the season, depending on where you're going. Mm-hmm. And that's always something important to watch out for. And the age of Instagram, and I know that a lot of retirees are on Instagram and Facebook and posting their photos of their holidays. How important is it to stay at that luxurious hotel? Are you still seeing that trend? Be able to get the selfie in the front of the Imperial Palace or in front of the Four Seasons on the Bosphorus, for instance. Can we do that for the whole trip, or are you finding people are kind of blending it together?
Yeah, I think how deep you want to go with behavioural finance here. Yeah, hopefully you're at an age, if you're a pre-retire or retiree, where you've realised that doesn't make much of a difference.
Yeah. You never know.
But you never know, and if you're a retirement influencer, then power to you. I certainly think that you can make a juggle here, and you can get the balance right. one of my philosophies with cars for a long time has been the idea of avoiding what I call a level up trap. I saw this with a lot of my mates really early, and I said I'm not going to do it.
I've been judged on my car decision, so
well, everyone can judge me on my car decisions. So the level up trap for me is when you are in a financial position whereby you say, yeah, life's good and I'm going to buy a nice car. And then after a little while, the shine starts to, the gloss starts to wear off and you think, you know what, I wouldn't mind getting a nicer car. So then you do that. And then you enjoy that for a time and then say, oh, there's actually a car that I'd like even more. And without even realizing over a period of, let's say, 5 to 8 years, your standards around your car have completely changed because you've just leveled up. And human beings are not good at going backward. Yeah. Whenever we get used to a standard, we find ourselves sort of pegged to that. And so for me, the level up trap, or trying to avoid that with cars, was the idea of buying a nice car, or my perception of that, and enjoying it, and then leveling down. To a normal car for a time, and then going back to a nice car, and then leveling down. So, for example, when I was younger, I bought a Volkswagen Golf R, which I really enjoyed. It was
hooning around the streets.
Well, look, I'll leave you to describe that. But no, look, I was a young kid and I really enjoyed the car, and it got to a point where it was time to sell the car. And instead of going up to the car which I really wanted, I bought a Volkswagen Golf, which was selling sort of a 45k car and buying a 13k car. And it wasn't much of a difference. What's more, I found that because I'd already got over the enjoyment, so to speak, the driving experience of the Golf R and so on, it actually didn't feel like a big deal to level down.
Started catching the train.
Yeah. So I leveled down for a little while, and then after 2 or 3 years of driving that car, I leveled up. I bought an Audi S3, and I had that for a few years, and then I leveled down to just trying to avoid going up. Yeah. And this, I think, can work really, really well with holidays too, which is that if you're going overseas, often, especially if you're doing one particular thing that you say, I can't wait to, like we're going to see the Northern Lights. And so we're going up to Norway, or for example, we're going to go into one of those magnificent glass igloos and hopefully get some incredible views, etc. That part of the travel is so expensive that it's very easy not to, in a relative sense, frame the rest of the holiday with equivalent costs. Yeah. Well, we're spending 5 days in Norway and that's going to cost $10,000. So surely spending $1,000 a night at a hotel or $800 a night is fine in a relative sense. True. You could also get a good outcome for $250 a night. Yeah. And so avoiding that level up trap of saying, okay, this is a really opulent holiday. It doesn't have to be. Certainly some points of it can be really opulent, but the whole thing doesn't have to be level 10.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Australian Retirement Podcast. I'm Owen Rask, the founder of the Rask Group and Chief Financial Officer of Rask Invest. One of the great things about retirement is you get to switch off your active income and move into a mode where you rely on passive income from your investments. This can be a daunting time for a lot of people. In fact, most people in our community will seek financial advice at this time in their lives. So if you're watching the Australian Retirement Podcast, you should know that we have resources to help you find a qualified and vetted financial advisor. To get in touch with one of our financial advisors or partner advisors, you can head to the YouTube description that's below the video and simply click the link to get taken to a page where you'll find lots of resources for finding a financial planner. We've even created a matching tool which matches you to an advisor that we think may be suitable for your stage of life, your assets, or your goals. And you can also find resources on how to verify financial planners and their qualifications. It's all available in the link in your YouTube description. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah, and I've found something like simple things like driving, which once you get over that, it can be incredibly scary the first few times, jumping on freeways, driving 150, 160, whatever it happens to be. But in reducing the amount of internal flights, if you say going to Europe, which one are more expensive and more restrictive, but it also avoids transfers, having to go backwards and forwards to the airport, and it actually results in a more enjoyable trip because you're not spending so much time in an airport. Removes travel days, so you can get a pretty good rentals for a reasonable price and drive the country. Stick to Italy, go Italy. We're only talking about Europe, but you can in most countries you can do it as well. Which is how do you limit the incidental costs that come with traveling? I think that's incredibly important.
I agree. Yeah, I think about having said all of that.
Kids helps to have those as well. Don't want to put kids on a train.
We had a holiday in Spain a little while ago, and flew over there, and this was a mistake of mine. What I should have done, we arrived in the middle of the day and we had a hire car. What I should have done is said, look, despite the fact that we have a hire car, let's just stay super close to the airport one night, etc. But didn't do that. So I've been on a plane for a long time, and we all bundled up into the car. You're driving on the opposite side of the road, and I just navigated around about as poorly as you can navigate around about. A combination of being tired plus the familiar, new environment. And I had a very, very patient driver that just sort of stopped right in front of me and just looked at me like, you muppet, what are you doing in the roundabout right now? I think I was going like close enough to the wrong way. I just was looking in the wrong direction when I entered. Every bit of it was bad. So yes, by all means, drive. It was
avoid roundabouts.
It was a great experience, but yeah, know your limits. If you're going to drive, then especially if you have a long haul flight, maybe just spend a night doing not much before you take off.
And any other tips to keep those costs low?
Well, yes, absolutely. How long are you going for? We were talking before about that advantage that you have over a lot of other households or families, which would be that when you go overseas, you can do it for an extended period of time, whereas a lot of others might not necessarily be able to do that because you've got to get home to work, or the kids have got school starting on Monday week, or all of those reasons. So consider leveraging the fact that you can have an extended stay. So recently was talking to someone who lives in Melbourne at the moment. She lives overseas or resides overseas. She came from Europe. She's come over to Australia, and she's basically just pet minding.
Yeah.
Her accommodation's looked after. She's living in some of those beautiful houses, and she's just built a good reputation on pet minding.
Cat or a dog, yeah.
That's right. She's been in Australia for 9 months and having an incredible time. I appreciate that sort of work, whether it's house sitting or pet minding. So I recognize that that's not easy work. There's other layers to that. But if that meant, would you take for example, you have to pay your own accommodation, and subsequently, in part because of the costs, you're going to spend 2 weeks in a city, or you can stay for 6 weeks in a city with no accommodation.
Yeah.
Well, you run those two things, each of their own. But if you've got the time, then that 6-week option may very well be the best one available.
I kind of like this idea of if you can plan far enough ahead, and if you're entering retirement, you want to travel every year for the next 10 years, pick a country or pick a place and centralize yourself. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of renting an apartment in a capital city, having a day bag to take to other cities and being able to catch a train rather than travel like the Europeans tend to travel, as opposed to packing up a giant suitcase every 3 days and moving on to the next place. So I think it's but each to their own. Some people want to see as many things as they possibly can in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And don't have the ability to travel every year either. So
I also reckon that, and this is a personal view, but having spoken with someone that does this extensively, that home swap deal is actually a pretty killer deal if you're a retiree, or if your lifestyle is such that you've got the flexibility to work from anywhere. And we are so lucky in Australia because, of course, we're in Australia. We're in this magnificent country, politically stable, magnificent views, blue skies, gorgeous oceans. And it's so desirable. So many people want to come and stay in Australia and spend time in Australia. And there is a huge market out there to home swap and say, okay, well, I want to find someone in the US. Let's pick someone in New York, for example, and we'll live in your house and you live in mine. And now accommodation is not an issue at all.
Yeah.
So I can actually go and live as a New Yorker for a month, 2 months, 3 months.
Flight,
yeah, that's right. And similarly, they can come and enjoy our beautiful city. So when I move to retirement for mine, I'd imagine this will definitely be a focus.
Is that something we forget too when we're traveling? I mean, I've spent too much of my life in a car going around Australia, but is it possible to focus back on Australia? Is that somewhere we're kind of underappreciating?
Not over 13 days, mate. Yeah, absolutely.
I've seen enough of this country. Get me out of here.
Yeah, I imagine question without notice, you'd have a lot of members or clients who would say, let's get a caravan, let's go on some adventures.
Interestingly, most of them are actually either Queensland or WA based. It seems to be less popular in New South Wales and Victoria. For I guess the beaches, there's less areas where you can be as remote as those two states, but it tends to be the case. Yeah.
Well, it's not really any surprise. We've got a few members similarly that are doing this and prioritizing it. They absolutely love it. It makes heaps of sense for them. It's great for their lifestyle and they're having a ball. And I'm led to believe, save for the fuel expenses, that if the overall costs on a day-to-day basis, if you manage things well, are relatively similar to if you're at home. So in terms of raw bang for buck on a day-to-day basis, going on a domestic holiday and driving up the coast, whichever, or down the coast or across the coast, or whichever way you want to do it, is a fantastic way to go out for an adventure.
So we've done the fun part. Now I feel like we have to get to the hard part.
Go on.
I know you've got a rule of 1/15th, but let's talk about how to budget for and to actually pay for a holiday. And probably more importantly, like they say that some of the value of a financial advisor comes in the form of helping you make trade-offs.
Yep.
There is obviously some trade-offs we need to consider when we're looking to travel and how much we can afford to travel. I think you've got a case study we might be able to go through in this regard.
Yeah, luckily I just stumbled across it.
Here's what I prepared earlier.
Yeah. So yes, firstly, let's hook back to that 1/15th concept. We've previously spoken in this show about the idea that if your expenses, your retirement expenses, are equal to or less than 1/15th of your investment assets, so that's your superannuation, any allocated pension money that you have, and also your any investment properties, direct shares, anything that you own in your own name. If it's less than 1/15th, or if it's more than or equal to 1/15th, as a rule of thumb, you're going to be okay. And the reasoning is because at 1/15th, that means you're taking around about 6% a year of your overall investment base to fund your retirement. And that's a healthy enough number to expect that you should be able to get by throughout your life expectancy.
And that's similar to the FIRE 4% rule.
Yeah.
With a slightly different, probably cognizant of retirement is 20 to 30 years and FIRE is longer.
That's
generally.
Right. Yeah. And also to add to that, with FIRE is not going to be reliant on age pension the way that a retirement protection will. So it's not 4%, it's about 6.5.
Yeah.
So if we're looking to, and having modeled this in just what happens when you are 65 years old, for example, and then you say, right, well, I think in this scenario, we had $1.2 million of super and expenses of $80,000. Now we can move these numbers any which way. You could have $150,000 of expenses. You just commensurately need to increase 1/15 squared, 2.25 mil or something along those lines to get it right.
Yeah.
However, the numbers are in this scenario, this is that pure 1/15th scenario. They've got 1.2 mil. What's 1/15th? That's 80,000. They're spending that much.
Yeah.
And if they do that, or if this individual does that, then over the next 20 plus years, they're not going to run out of money. They're going to be left with about $150,000 in total retirement assets, i.e. super balance goes from 1.2 mil down to 1.15 over a 20-year period.
Yeah.
Still spending their $80,000 a year.
Solid result.
Yeah, happy days. And the reason why it hasn't eroded altogether in reality is because under this model, you're going to be getting age pension toward the tail, and that's going to mean you need to have less reliance on your own money to fund that $80,000. Now, conversely, if we talk about the same model, but let's imagine we have someone who says, for the first 5 years, I really want to I've got heaps of holidays that I want to do. I just want to go out, and I haven't had the chance to do it beforehand. So this is my moment. This is the summer of George, and I'm just going to go out and see as much of the world as I can. Well, in that
just
model,
a little Seinfeld.
Yeah, that's
there
right.
for those listening at home.
Great episode. So in that model, well, surprise, surprise, you're going to run out of money. And you're going to run out of money around about 4 years earlier in this scenario than otherwise. But it was going to be about 87, and in this case, you're running out of money about 83.
Yeah.
So that's a poor outcome, of course, because in that scenario, running out of money, as we talked about before, means I only get my age pension, which we'll call $1,100 a fortnight, and I've got to find another way to fund. For example, I might reverse mortgage the house, downsize, some of those sorts of things. So from a trade-offs perspective, how do we fix that? Well, there's only a few ways that we can resolve it. The first way, of course, is that you could, in some capacity, continue to work.
Yep.
So you might say, for the next 5 years, I'm going to spend $30,000, but I'm going to work part-time 1 day a week, and I'm going to, for example, I was on $100K before, so I'll keep $20,000 of income and basically fund my holiday adventures by doing that work. That's a viable option,
but
right?
with the reward in mind. I think that's key. Once you know this trade-off, it probably would make me more comfortable going back to work and toiling again.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you should let everyone know about it. Rub their face, rub their nose in the fact that I'm only here to go on my adventure.
I do that every day.
Well played. All right, so that's number one. The first option, of course, is to increase the earnings that exist or that are likely to happen in your fund. But this bit is a little bit more nuanced because the only way to increase earnings, generally speaking, is to take more risk in your portfolio. And if you've got your $1.2 million super balance, which we've already worked out is going to last you, 20 years, for example, we don't necessarily want to be putting it in a place where we're going to experience a heap amount more volatility. When I ran these numbers to look at how we could potentially replace that, if you were to put around about 20% of that balance, so 1.2 million, 20% would be 240K, for example, and we took that 240K out, or to rephrase, we reallocated that 240K so it was more aggressively invested. That over the duration of the next 20 years, because you're going to leave that to last, just leave that money alone and don't touch it. Yeah. Rely on the other, $960,000 to fund your retirement over the next 15 plus years. In that scenario, that will actually fix that gap for you.
Yeah.
So you'll be back in the same spot you were, but you've enjoyed 5 incredible years of retirement.
The key is kind of leaving it by itself though, isn't it? Because if you're taking a more aggressive approach with those assets, it's likely to be more volatile.
It will be.
And if you kind of view that on a daily, if we find all the time, you view that on a daily basis, something like Trump happens, there's more risk that you might sell out of that. Hence why it's important to, lack of a better term, bucket it or put it to this, hide it. Could be hiding it from yourself. Who knows?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Good, viable options. But I agree with the concept of bucketing it.
Yeah.
Because if your super balance is falling and all you can see is just one value and this is wrapped into that, then you're just going to feel like that single amount is just pulling down the balance. It's going to create a lot of uncertainty for you. But if you were to bucket that 240,000, and even if we had that massive worst case scenario GFC type fall and suddenly you see that dive by 100,000 from 240 down to 140, you hopefully can still look at that in the stead of saying, well, I don't need this money for another 15 years. And the intention here was to not touch it until then. So let's leave it. And all things being equal, we should well and truly have time to make up for that.
Yeah, exactly. And do we have we kind of went through one of 2 case studies there. The second one was pretty clear what the impact was going to be too. And what do you do? What can people do if they have even less than those case studies and still have the itch to keep traveling?
Well, firstly, we've already talked about how we can get our costs down in retirement. Yeah, that's an obvious thing. But if you understand your expenses very well, and a real focus may be, what can I do in order to reduce my expenses to the extent where I can have these holidays?
Trading off again.
That's right. Definitely a trade-off.
Are there lifestyle changes we can make with a view to, or are there ways where we can have a big holiday one year and know that we won't be able to do it for 3 or 4 years afterwards?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and all in all, my experience is for the most part, you can dial this down pretty considerably. You can, as in your own expenses in retirement. If you're hell-bent on getting your costs as low as possible, especially when you've got a good goal, like, for example, going on holidays.
Yeah.
If you're willing to go back to work one day a week, for God's sake, you can dial down your expenses a little bit in order to be able to fund the same thing. So that's a great trade-off conversation to either have with an advisor, or if you understand your numbers really well, to look at that and make a conscious decision. But the key thing that I'd really like to present to anyone listening and contemplating that idea of making those cash flow trade-offs, like being more disciplined with your finances, is being deliberate about where you make compromises.
Yeah.
Because if the general gist of your life is, I've just got to keep costs down, that's going to be a very stressful and unenjoyable way to fund your retirement. Yeah, that's right. Now, conversely, if you were much more dialed in and said, no, my expenses are going to be normal, but I'm specifically not going to spend on A and B and C. They're the areas that I don't make, or I spend as little as possible, and the rest of my life is as per normal. That's a much more empowering way to live your life, and you're not constantly
cut everything.
Feeling that worry of, maybe I shouldn't be spending money in this area or that.
And so we like to finish off with these episodes with a bit of a DIY. And what if there was one thing you suggested, let's say those not yet retired and those in retirement should do around travel? Is there one thing people should take away from this?
Yeah, definitely. It's to know your numbers. Because if you know what your retirement is going to, what your baseline retirement is going to look like based on your trajectory right now, it so much better enables confident decisions around what I can afford to do and when I can afford to do it. Yeah. Now, of course, you can naturally do that by going and seeing a financial advisor, but with respect to you, if you're any good with Excel, or if you're any good with ChatGPT or any of those tools, you would be able to determine how to build out a simple formula that's likely to tell you how that's going to go. So there's lots of ways to do it yourself if you want, or alternatively, if you want the proper deep dive experience, then go and sit with an advisor and get these numbers clear.
And for those listening at home, we'll put some of these examples in the show notes as well. But we hope this one's been helpful. This episode's been helpful and insightful on travel. I've just booked my trip to Europe while we're online here. And thanks to your advice, I've taken the premium economy option. But once again, thanks, James. It was really good going deep on this one with you. And thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you very much, mate. Good fun.
Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you want to hear more from us, you can get daily videos and podcasts on Rask's YouTube channel. Or if you want to enroll in a free course on investing, property, business, money, you name it, you can join over 34,000 other students and enroll in a free course on the Rask website. Simply head to www.rask.com.au and follow the prompts. Thanks for watching this Rask podcast.